First of all, I apologize because all my examples are going to be from American literature, and with one exception from Massachusetts American literature. And secondly, let me just say a quick caveat, which is I'm a practitioner of scholarly editing, but I've never really been a theorist of scholarly editing. So I began to get into pondering the question of why we need scholarly editions or why we create them, really only as a result of conferences like this and being involved as in the projects that David mentioned, having to do with Henry James's complete letters. And I've been editing two of the novels in Cambridge's 35-volume edition of James's complete fiction. So these projects have been immensely fulfilling, and I enjoyed the work a lot and learned a lot, but I have to confess that my royalty reports don't reveal evidence for a very strong demand for these editions. The fact of volumes printed and sold in the hundreds, not thousands, let alone tens of thousands, suggests that the reception of scholarly editions is not overwhelming. And obviously, cost is an issue. Book lovers surely blanch at the thought of paying three-digit sums for a scholarly edition of a novel by Henry James, especially if a good paperback with an engaging introduction and informative endnotes is available at a fraction of the price. Libraries, no doubt, blanch just as much, especially in these days of shrinking acquisitions budgets. And of course, there's also the internet. I remember a time when we were led to believe that the internet was free, and many predicted that it would be the solution to all kinds of financial challenges. Indeed, there now exist freely accessible websites that are of genuine use to the scholarship of literature, such as two that I often use in my classes, the Walt Whitman Archive and the Emily Dickinson Archive. Much of what a scholarly edition does, as opposed to a trade book, can also be done on the internet. Thus, my central question, given the small distribution of scholarly editions and the wide accessibility of the internet, does the scholarly edition published in book form by a reputable university press still have a place in an evolving world of digital humanities and the information age? I will try to give a convincing argument that the answer is yes, even though scholarly internet sites can and already do capably do much of what print scholarly editions do. Scholarly editions, according to one commentator, provide, quote, reliable texts, a critical argument about the production and transmission of those texts, and critical apparatus, textual introduction, and other forms of commentary. The 36-page, all right, now I got to see if I can, there, okay. 36-page single-spaced guidelines for editors of Cambridge's complete fiction of Henry James specify that each volume will include, in addition to the fictional text itself, textual variants, a list of emendations, a glossary of foreign words and phrases, a bibliography, and textual and overall introductions. The purpose of the overall introduction, this is a larger passage I'm going to read just a few lines from. The purpose of the overall introduction is to, quote, tell as fully as possible the history of the work's production so as to constitute an unignorable point of reference for those doing serious work on it, end quote. There's much to cover here, and other scholarly editions, I assume, cover very similar ground. However, there's nothing here that internet sites cannot cover as well. For instance, an internet site can include one or more introductory pages that describe a text's genesis and history, and a work's situation relative to its author's career and to contemporary and more recent cultural and critical context. The Walt Whitman Archive includes pages on the author's biography, written by leading scholars. There is a detailed chronology of Whitman's life as well. There are transcriptions of over 5,500 letters annotated. Hence, there is considerable coverage of the poet's relationships to friends, family, and literary and publishing associates. One can see from the site's homepage, there are numerous other resources, including not just a bibliography of selected criticism, but links within that bibliography to articles and books. All of this material is the product of leading Whitman scholarship, and all of it provides much the same kind of contextualization that the apparatus to a scholarly edition does. Another feature of a scholarly edition, a reliable text, can also be provided by an internet site. Editions of a website can use the same methods of proofreading, etc., to establish a reliable text that editors of scholarly editions use. The internet result, however, can be displayed in a variety of ways. One such way is to show a facsimile of the original text and next to it a transcription. And I apologize here, the screen is much too small for you to see, but what you have is a page out of the original edition of Leaves of Grass followed by a transcription. So this approach to this is the approach of the Whitman and Dickinson archives. For the Dickinson archive, you've gotten to the left side of the screen the actual manuscript, and to the right side a transcription. And this juxtaposition of facsimile with transcription gives users the chance to verify for themselves the accuracy of a transcription. Another feature that sites can present are textual variants, just as scholarly editions do, except that sites can use techniques that are not available in book form and that sometimes can make it easier to understand and follow the text's evolution from one version to another. This site, a simple variorum e-text of Henry James's first novel, Watch and Ward, uses strike-through in different colors to show textual emendations from the original serial. The crossed out green is the original serial. The sort of brownish red is the later book publication. You might notice, for example, this one, the cool, where I had my cursor for a second, the cool night air restored the healthy tone of his sensibilities, became the cool night air, suggested sweeter things. And I think you can see at a glance, this is a sort of an intuitive way of showing the two published versions of this novel, and is one example of how a scholarly website could show variants. Readers surely find this variorum e-text easier to use than the traditional list of variants. So here's the same page, but from the just published Cambridge University Press edition of Watch and Ward. You can see, let's see if I can find my cursor, that same line about the cool night air. So the cool night air suggested sweeter things. Then you have to go to much later in the volume to see that at line 23 of page 6, the cool night air suggested sweeter things had been the cool night air restored the healthy tone of his sensibilities. The Whitman archive and the Dickinson archive offer other approaches to presenting multiple versions of these poets' texts. The Whitman archive shows both facsimiles and transcriptions, as I've already showed you, of the different published editions of Leaves of Grass. So you go to the index of the different editions, and users can search from there the same poem from one edition to another. And if you have a large screen or multiple screens, you can even juxtapose the different versions of the same poem. If you have a big enough screen, you can have 3 or 4 different versions all next to each other. So you could see at a glance what differences there might be. Obviously, with a long poem that's 40 pages like The Song of Myself, that might be a little harder. The Emily Dickinson archive allows users to search by poem, and I'm just showing you a search result page. It provides facsimiles, as I already showed you before, of the actual manuscripts, as well as transcriptions, and leaves the work of collation to the users. But I wanted you to see the contrast with the print scholarly edition, the variorum edition of Dickinson's poems, edited by R.W. Franklin and then published by Harvard University Press, gives the transcription of the text of each version of each of Dickinson's poems, and provides a table, here's what a table for a different poem looks like, of each of the variants at the end of the section devoted to a poem, leaving readers to puzzle out the collation. The work, therefore, of informing readers about textual variants remains complex, be it in a book edition or on an internet site. The result can often be just as difficult to comprehend. The case of that Watch and Ward variant e-text, however, shows that, at least for editions that do not have too large a number of variants, that an internet text can display variants in a user-friendly way. Another feature of scholarly editions is informational notes. Hyperlinks make it possible to solve one of the problems with the ways notes appear in books. Footnotes at the bottom of the page are easier to find but can be distracting. Endnotes are less distracting, but locating them requires a greater effort. Hyperlinks can be both convenient to use and less distracting. The hyperlinks in texts on the American Transcendentalism website produced by the English department at Virginia Commonwealth University offer a solution less obtrusive than footnotes, but more convenient than endnotes. You just click on one of the red things and you get the note. Although you have to be sure that you've figured out how to make your computer permit necessary pop-ups if you want to use this feature. No doubt, part of the challenge and satisfaction of creating a scholarly literature website arises from the relative lack, when compared to printed scholarly editions, of traditional conventions. The creators of the sites in my examples not only carried out their scholarly work, but they designed their websites from scratch. The Emily Dickinson Archive limits itself, and here I'm quoting from its homepage, to making available high-resolution images of Dickinson's surviving manuscripts, end quote. The site exists in part, therefore, so as to save wear and tear on the manuscripts themselves, which are, of course, unique and irreplaceable. It also enables Dickinson scholars to see these manuscripts from one location, as opposed to having to travel between the manuscript libraries that hold them. At the same time, the manuscript books of Emily Dickinson, which were published in 1981 by Harvard University Press, also present, albeit in 2 volumes, 1,400 pages, facsimiles of many of Dickinson's manuscripts. Granted, these volumes are expensive. They do, though, provide much the same service, and with the added advantage that it is easier to recognize which poems Dickinson included in which fascicles and sets. The Whitman Archive serves a different purpose. It is a comprehensive scholarly resource for students and scholars of Whitman's work. One way in which it is especially useful is in making available all the editions of Leaves of Grass. Usually published editions of Leaves of Grass might include the first edition, which was only 12 poems, and then the final edition, which is hundreds of poems, but you don't have the intermediary editions. We can, thanks to the archive, the online archive, see how Whitman changed particular poems from one edition to another, and how he reorganized the poems in sections over the course of the 6+ editions of Leaves of Grass. A Whitman scholar might tell me otherwise, but I find it hard to imagine how a print edition of Whitman's complete poetry would arrange things so as to provide similar access to all of the variants in all of the poems and sections of all of the editions of Leaves of Grass. We see, therefore, how scholarship on the internet offers interesting and useful possibilities. No news there, really, I think. Such scholarship can offer much of what print scholarly editions do, contextualizing scholarly introductions, reliable texts, a textual history, textual variants, informational annotation, emendations, bibliography, etc. Not only that, but a scholarly edition internet site can offer greater ease of access, lower costs, access from anywhere there is an internet connection. And sites can present their material in a variety of interesting ways, as they are less bound by the traditional conventions of scholarly print editions. What place, then, is there for scholarly print editions? Is there still a place? The disadvantage of internet sites like the ones I've been discussing has to do with the technology. I already hinted at one problem when I remarked at the need to be sure that pop-ups are enabled when attempting to view the informational hyperlink notes in the Virginia Commonwealth University American Transcendental texts. Printed books are a tried and true technology that pose little challenge to their users. With websites, not all users are equally adept. Now, you might, of course, one might object, users of the internet have to learn digital literacy, just like all of us at one time learned print literacy. There are limitations, however, not just on the user's side. There is the question of maintenance of the medium. Books, once printed and bound, need only to be stored in the correct and safe temperature and humidity ranges. At worst, and only after excessive use, they might need to be rebound. Perhaps the paper will crumble one day, but we're talking about centuries, not decades, or in the case of some internet sites, not even decades. A book is easy to reproduce, for example, a damaged book, on a photocopier, on a scanner, with one's camera. Internet sites, on the other hand, can disappear. And this is a serious problem. For one, as the information age evolves, a website may become incompatible with the newer devices we use for access to the internet. But of even greater concern is what happens when the sponsoring organization of a site decides to cut costs. The internet, we now know, is not free. Somebody has to pay to keep material available on the internet. Here is one excellent website that nearly went down recently. It's called Hawthorne in Salem. This site has been housed for over 20 years at North Shore Community College near Salem, where the site's principal creator, now retired, once taught. Last winter, the college threatened to close the site as a cost-cutting move. It took the organizing of a protest by Hawthorne scholars to convince the institution to reverse its decision and to cancel the canceling. So, saved for the time being. But how long will it be before another administrative bean cutter decides that the cost of maintaining the site is too expensive? And how many other university accountants are pondering similar decisions elsewhere? Unless you think I am scaremongering, contemplate the life and death of the online calendar of the letters and correspondence of Henry James. This massive database, created during the 1990s and constantly updated, recorded all the pertinent information, date, place, housing archive or collection, whether published or not, about each and every extant letter by James, of which there are reckoned to be about 10,000. This online calendar was an essential resource for work on James's letters and very useful to biographical work on James. For many years, the University of Nebraska Press stored this site and made it freely accessible. Then one day, the site closed. The Center for Henry James Studies at nearby Creighton University sought to transfer the calendar to its own site, but for technical reasons, I gather, it has so far been unable to do so. It takes a lot more effort to destroy all extant copies of a book. Even Nathaniel Hawthorne could not, much as he wanted to, when he became ashamed of it, destroy all the copies of his apprentice novel, Fanshawe. Losing the scholarship on an intellectually valuable website is far easier. Losing the scholarship in a scholarly print edition is much harder. There is no question that the internet sites I have discussed, and many others like them, have their place in the work of scholars and teachers of literature. But scholarly print editions do as well. So just one final point, I'm almost done. So why not produce both a print and digital version of a scholarly edition? Surely the ideal solution is to produce scholarly editions in both print and digital form. My fellow panelists will explore this question in some more detail, I think. So I'm only adding these few words as a footnote to my comments. When we began work almost 30 years ago on the complete letters of Henry James, the editorial team and the press were in agreement that we would produce both print and electronic versions. Back in the days of diskettes, we blithely imagined that we would submit 2 sets of diskettes to the publisher, who in turn would send one set to the page setters, who would prepare this print edition, and the other set to someone we sort of blithely imagined was the internet person, who would tap a few keys, and presto, the online version would be up and running. No, I'm afraid not. How naive we were. The electronic edition never got off the ground, and we pursued all kinds of possibilities. It turned out that for technical reasons, the 2 versions had to be conceived and created from the very start completely separately from each other. And we did not have the effort or the energy or the time to edit twice the complete letters of Henry James. So thank you for listening.